Today is 28th of June 2023. We started looking at percentages yesterday, and today I want to continue with that. I have a question here. Okay, we said a percentage is a fraction over 100. Okay, so 20 over 100, 15 over 100, 47 over 100. All these are percentages in fraction form. So 15 over 100 is just 15%. Okay, now what I want to show you today, I want to just give you some example whilst I show you some of the questions you might be looking at, which is quite obvious, but at times students don't really know what to do. Okay, so if they twist the question a little bit, then it means that they are stuck. But you shouldn't be. So I'm going to look at it from different angles, from the angle of fractions, decimals, and percentages. Okay, so the clue is reading the question and doing exactly what it's asking you to do. Okay, don't make it complicated, just do the question. So let's look at this example. What is 15 as a percentage of 90? Leave answer to 2 decimal places. So straight away you know that your answer has to be in 2 decimal places. Okay, here what you are going to do is you need to make the fraction first and multiply by 100, because they said what is 15 as a percentage of 90. So you are going to find 15 over 90 of 100. I hope I'm making sense. Okay, so we make a fraction first. So our fraction, what is 15 as a percentage of 90? So the first part is the fraction. So 15 over 90 times 100. This, to get this explanation, assuming they ask you what is 15 percent, so 15% is 15 over 100, but they are asking you to find 15 as a percentage of not 100, but this time of 90. Okay, so now we have the fraction part first, then we multiply by 100. Now to make 100 look like a fraction, we just divide it by 1. We've seen this several times. Any number divided by 1 is the same number. Okay, so now we have 2 fractions multiplying. When we were doing multiplication of fractions, we said you multiply the numerators and multiply the denominators and leave the answer and simplify. Okay, so now let's see what we have here. Okay, now we have 15 times 100 is 1500. 90 times 1 for the denominators is 90. Okay, now how many tens do we have in 1,500? 150. That is straightforward. How many tens do we have in 99? Okay, now we can go further. 3 is a factor of both, because 3 times 5 is 15, which that's why we have 150 here. It gets the addition of 0. 3 times 3 is 9. So how many 3s do we have in 150? 50. Because 3 times 5 is 15. Then we bring the 0. How many 3s do we have in 9? 3. This can come in a calculator paper. Okay, so now we have 50 over 3, and then you use your calculator to get if you put 50 over 3 into a calculator, you are going to get 16.67% to 2 decimal places, because the question says leave your answer to 2 decimal places. So that is the first example I have for you. Now, a second example. What is 21% of 75? The same principle here, but this can come in the non-calculator paper. I'll tell you why. Look, 21 as a percentage of 75. So you have 21 over 75. So this is our first fraction, times 100. Then we over 1, because 100 over 1 is the same as 100. All we are doing here is to make it look like 2 fractions, because at times people just write, students just write 100, and then they multiply the numerator and then multiply the denominator by 100. But if you put 1 here, then it tells you that your numerators, it differentiates the numerators from the denominators. So now you wouldn't muddle up and be multiplying 100 both numerator and denominator. I hope I'm clear. So now look at it. 75 here and 100 there. How 25 can divide 75? 25 can divide 100. So how many 25s do we have in 75? 3. How many 25s do we have in 100? 4. Okay, so now we've reduced it. But if you look at 21 and 3, this is where I can't stress enough. Knowing your times table is important, but it will come as you do this. If you have a GCSE to do and you abandon it till last minute, then you wouldn't have this thinking pattern. But if you at least try and do 30 minutes of maths every day, then you'll be able to have this knowledge so that you'll be able to apply it when you have to. Okay, so now 21 and 3. How many 3s do we have in 3? 1. How many 3s do we have in 21? 7. So this is what I have here. So 21 over 3 times 4 over 1. From this step, I go there. Okay, so now 7 times 4 is 28. The denominators is 1 times 1 is 1. So now I've reduced what is 21 as a percentage of 75. So this one, you don't really need a calculator to solve it. all you have to do is to find the first fraction, multiply by 100, divide by 1. The 100 is like both of this two looks like fraction, and then you multiply the numerator and the denominator. But before you multiply, you can look for common factors that can reduce the number, which we have done. So now we only have 7 times 4, and you can do it without using a calculator. So a question like this, okay, can come in the non-calculator paper, where you don't need a calculator. But a question at the first part one might come as maybe a sub question, and maybe it will be a calculator paper, and then maybe from there, from this answer, you might need this answer to solve another question that is part of the question, the full question, to end up getting the full marks. Hope I'm clear on that. Now let's look at converting between fractions and decimals. Yesterday we said we can convert percentages to fractions and decimals, and we can do each of them back and forth. Okay, now to this part, let's look at how we can convert fractions to decimals, or maybe decimals to fraction. I think one of the videos I scratch on it a bit. Okay, if you are watching the videos from the beginning, you should see an example. One of the videos where I was doing fractions, I showed you a little bit of that. So this question is saying change 0.80 to a fraction in its simplest form. So what it means is whatever fraction you get, you have to try and use the factors to get it into the simplest form. Now the decimal here is 0.80, so to the fraction. So now you have 0.80. okay, so I'm going to put my sign, my over here, this line here. Okay, I have two decimal places, so under 0 I'm going to write 0. Okay, and then under 8 I'll write 0. When I get to the decimal, I'll put a 1. We've done this in one of the videos. Okay, so this is a recap. So now here I have 80 over 100. This is 80 over 100. How many 20s do I have in 80? 4. How many 80s do I have in 100? 5. If I leave my answer as 80 over 100, yes, it is a fraction, but it's not in the simplest form. So I might end up losing, if it's 2 marks, I might end up losing a mark for not going a step further. Okay, we want to take as many marks as we can. As you can see, this is an easy question. So if you are supposed to, even if it's 1 mark, you don't want to lose half mark because you didn't go the step. Okay, if they are not asking you to put in the simplest form, if the question didn't say that, then even if you leave it at 80 over 100, you will still get the full marks. But as long as the question is asking you to do that, then you have to try and go a step further. So all you need to know here is 20 is a factor of both 80, and it's easy. So this question can come in a non-calculator paper because you don't need a calculator to do this. Okay, now let's look at the next example. change 0.3 into a fraction in its simplest form. Here again, your answer should be in the simplest form. Okay. Now, an advantage of putting answers in simplest form, assuming you have 80 over 100 to put in the next question, it is very bulky. But 4 over 5 is easier, assuming it's a non-calculator paper. So immediately you see 80 over 100, you will just put 4 over 5, which will be easier for you to solve. Okay, so maybe they might give you this as the beginning of the question, and then from there they will give you other questions. When I introduce you to all this basic stuff, I'll start solving actual questions with you, and you see what I mean. Okay, now change not 0.3 into a fraction in its simplest form. Okay, so we have 0.3. Here is one decimal place, so I draw my line under 0.3. Under 3 I put 0, under the decimal I put 1. Okay, so now I have 3 divided by 10. They don't have any common factors, so this is the simplest form, so I can't break it any further. All right, let's go to the next example we have here. Convert or change. If they say convert or change, it means the same thing. Okay, 2 over 5 as a decimal. Here what we did was we had a decimal and we changed it into fraction. Okay, now let's have a look at a fraction into a decimal. How do we do that? When you use your calculator and you put it 2 divided by 5, you are going to get 0.4. Okay, but you can also use this method to do it so that you can have it. Okay, that is if you don't have a calculator. So now 2 over 5, so you put 2 in and then you put 5 outside the division. Now before you start anything, you put a decimal point and then you add a 0. How many 5s do you have in 20? 4. 4 times 5 is 20. When you subtract, you get 0, so you can't go any further. So now your decimal becomes 0.4. Okay, so let's have a look at it. 4 over 5, 2 over 5. Okay, 5 cannot go into 2, so you put a decimal point and add 0. So now you have 20. How many 5s do we have in 20? 4. 4 times 5 is 20. 20 minus 20 is 0. So when you put a 0 there, your answer is 0.4. That is how you can change a fraction into decimal. Let's look at another one quickly. Here you have convert 1 over 4 to decimal. Okay, 1 over 4 on its own means 1 divided by 4. So here again, because it's not top heavy, okay, now what do we do? 4 goes outside the division sign and 1 going to it. 4 cannot go into 1. Okay, so we put our decimal sign and add 0. How many 4s do we have in 10? 8. How many 4s do we have in 10? 2. 2 times 4 is 8. Okay, 10 minus 8 is 2. Then we add another 0. How many 4s do we have in 20? 5. 5 times 4 is 20. There. So 20 minus 20 is 0. So now our decimal is 0.25. Okay, that is if you don't have a calculator. So now a fraction 1/4 becomes 0.25. Okay, and if you want the percentage, you divide by 100, which will give you 25%. Now convert between fractions and percentages. Okay, so what we did here, 1/4, we change it into a fraction, and I just said if you want to change this into a percentage, you multiply by 100 and then get 25%. So that is what I'm going to show you now. So convert between fractions and decimals. Change 1/4 to a percentage. Okay, so 1/4 times 100. Okay, how many so let's multiply the numerators. Okay, 1 times 100 is 100. 4 times 1 is 4. How many 4s do you have in 100? 25. So 25%. You are changing into percentages, so make sure you bring the percentage. I hope I'm clear. Okay, let's quickly look at a few examples and then we'll end today's lesson. Convert 9/30 to a percentage. Okay, so here 9/30 times 100, and then we put the dash over 1 because it still makes it 100, but it makes our work easier. Okay, so now let's look at it. 30 and 100. How many 10s do we have in 30? 3. How many 10s do we have in 100? 10. Okay, so now we have 3, 10, and then 3, 1. Now 3 and 9 can have factors. So how many 3s do we have in 3? 1. How many 3s do we have in 9? 3. So now we have 3 times 10, which is 30. 1 times 1, which is 1. So our answer will be 30%. Okay, a few of these you can use non-calculator method. Now let's look at this. Convert 34% as a fraction and leave it in the simplest form. So immediately they said 34%. You know that your fraction is 34/100. Okay, so 34/100. Half of 34 is 17. Half of 50 is 100. Half of 100 is 50. There is no common factor for 17 and 50. So in our simplest form is 17/50. Unless they ask us to go further and change it into decimal, then this might be in the calculator paper if they ask us to change into a decimal. So we'll do 17 divided by 50, and then we'll have 0 point something. Then maybe the question will say to a decimal place, to two decimal places. Whatever the question is asking you is what we would do. But here, this is where we end, because that's our simplest form. Another example, convert 72% as a fraction. 72% is 72 over 100. Okay, that is the first step. Now, half of 72 is 36. Half of 100 is 50. Now we can solve half again. Half of 36 is 18. Half of 50 is 25. So now our lowest form will be 18 over 25. Assuming again they ask us to leave our answer as a decimal, then we are going to use a calculator to put in 18 divided by 25. Maybe they might say to a decimal place or to 2 decimal places. Then we put the answer as the question is asking us to do. Okay, our last example for today, convert 45% as a fraction. So our first, we know that 45% is 45 over 100. Okay, now here, how many 5 is a factor of 45 and 5 is a factor of 100? So how many 5s do we have in 45? 9. How many 5s do we have in 120? There are no common factors for 9 and 20. If we had 10 and 20, then we could reduce it further, but now we have 9 and 20. So we've converted a percentage into fraction. If they are asking us to put our answer in a decimal form and we leave it in this form, it's not right, we'll lose marks. So now, if they are asking us to leave in a decimal form, either we'll do the method I showed you earlier using this method, or if it's a calculator paper, then we'll use the calculator to solve that. But if not, this is the answer here. Okay, so we are going to stop today's lesson here. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next lesson.